This is a Spring project that is using a repository, Spring repository, and it is using a custom in-memory implementation. So in this screencast, I'm going to try to move it from in-memory to Postgres. I think partially it has already been done. So let's see what the code looks like right now. So I have the code open here, and if you go to repository, there is a custom repository implementation of this party repository, which is using a custom hash map, concurrent hash map for in-memory data storage, and it is using this JDBC URL for interacting with the database. So it is doing some SQL statements, converting it into Java objects by itself, both for read and write. So in this screencast, I'm going to convert these kind of code, this implementation rather, to use something that is more Spring native. So I will be using Spring Data JDBC library. So look at that. So Spring Data JDBC is one of the ways of interacting with a relational database. So there are a lot of other ways. The most common one is Spring Data JPA, but it's slightly more complicated. So I'm going to keep it simple with Spring Data JDBC, with the goal of removing this custom code that interacts with any JDBC library. In this case, it's Postgres, and use a Spring native implementation, basically a Spring JDBC implementation. So before starting, let's see if the Docker container is running. Okay, it's not, so let me start. Okay, the Postgres is up, so let me connect. Okay, so let me list the databases. So there is no database right now. So this is the first time I'm working on this, so let me create the database. And let me see the code. It is called Jamboree, the database name. Okay. Alright, so let me see the databases. So it's now here. So let me connect to it. Okay, so now at least the current implementation should work. Okay, so let me run it. This is from the README. I'm repackaging it and running it as a jar. While this starts up. Okay, this is started. Let me make a request or something went wrong. Relation party does not exist. Okay, so party does not exist. So let me create. I don't think it is there here. So let me create a new file. Okay, let me just look at what does party look like. So there are no entities party. Okay, so it has these 4 fields. So let me just add it. What are my fields? ID, and ID is a long, so let's call it int. I'll actually call it serial. It's easier for later. Name, text, time is timestamp. Let me look at the databases. I'm looking at date time. So there is timestamp. I want to use that. Oh, that was right. Okay, so timestamp, location is text, and created get to work. So ID is a serial. So what is a serial? Okay. Let's see numeric types. Serial type is creates a sequence, so it's like an integer. All right. Okay, so it's the same as writing integer here for now. Okay, so let's see. Let's go to the database. Okay, so the server is still running. Let me create it. Now what? Party does not exist. That's weird. Let's restart it. Party does exist. Okay. Oh, column time party time does not exist. Oh, okay. So it is called party time. All right. So okay, so it seems to have worked. Let me try another one. Okay, ID 1, 2, 3. So select star from party. Alright, at least it is working now. Okay, cool. So that's that. Let me create. Alright, so this is just I'm just gonna connect this. Whoa. I should have not added that. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna add it to did ignore. Alright, so this is that. Okay, so I had to ignore the temporary directory, which is the databases directory. So this database that is running is storing it in local temp, and this is coming from Docker Compose. So it's yeah, this one. So local directory temp is being saved to the Postgres directory. So this is the Postgres data. All right. So this is working. So let me kill this now. Now our goal is to remove this implementation and rely on Spring Data JDBC, right? So this is being used in two places. So let me just first remove this and this bean. A bean is something that tells Spring that it wants to, even if Spring is looking for a certain kind of object, it will return this. I don't want this. I want the custom implementation to go away, right? Okay. So here I will remove this one. Okay, obviously now it won't work. So let's try to run it. Yeah, it doesn't work, but it doesn't tell me why it didn't work. So this has something to do with logging. The logging doesn't usually, this logging is not telling me a lot of the things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the log folder. So logging configuration. So currently my logging configuration is well suited for a few utilities, but I'm not going to use it right now. So I'm just going to move this to a backup file and then start my repository and then start my system. So logs are going to look a little different. Oh, wait a second. What did I do? I copied it. Okay, I should have moved it. Okay, so it's still going to read this, so I'm going to remove this. So status is that it is deleted. So now it should fall back to the default logging. So if I now run the system, it should now give me a different format of logs. Yep. So you see it's giving me all these colors, which is the default Spring logging format, but it's now telling me some more details about why it is not working. So this is requiring a bean, and that bean is not initialized. So now we need to define a way for this party repository to have a bean, a proper bean. To do that, let's first go to pom.xml. What is there? So we have the starter, we have the starter web, that is fine. Spring Data JPA, we are not going to use this. We are going to use Spring Data JDBC. So as we said before, we're going to use Spring Data JDBC. So let me remove that and put Spring Data JDBC. Okay, version should automatically match. This is a different dependency. These are logging dependencies. This is a logging dependency. This is a logging dependency. This is something else. Okay, Spring starter. Okay, this is fine. And we have a Postgres. So we are using Postgres in our repository, but I think this version is a little old. So I'll just fetch the latest version. Postgres JDBC. Maven. Okay, so I think 47.2 is the latest, so let me just copy that, and I will replace it with this, and it should at least start up now. Okay, it is working. Okay, let's see. Oh, it's not working. The bean is not available, so what is happening here? Okay, let's see. Spring Data JDBC is here. Oh, I think Spring Data Starter. I think we need a Spring Data Starter. Spring Data Starter. Data JDBC Starter, because it needs to bring in a few other dependencies. Let's say, let's look at a few samples. This is Spring JDBC. So JDBC starter. Usually the starter dependencies bring in a few other things. So we can look at that. What it is bringing in. Okay. MVN. Let me just get the dependency. Wait, what? Okay. Where my stuff? Not JDBC. What am I copying wrong? The library is wrong. The group is wrong. Okay. So, okay. Let's try this. Okay. At least it now works. Now what has happened is that it is now working, but it is not able to find the data source. It is not starting, but it's not starting due to different reason. So before it was failing due to a required bean not being present. Now the bean is present because we added the dependency, and it requires an URL. So let's try to configure that, but before doing that, let me just show the dependencies. So in this repository, so Spring Data JDBC comes in from Spring Boot Starter Data JDBC. So it brings in a few other things, among which is our Hikari dependency, which is thread pool management repository, and the Spring JDBC dependencies. Right, so we needed this one because it was bringing in these two top level dependencies. That's why it was not working before. Okay, so now we need a Spring URL, a data source URL from which the data will interact. Okay, so what we need to do is we will add a few settings in our application.yaml. So in application.yaml, okay, it's application.properties, I think. Okay, so let's go to the documentation. Okay, we don't need this anymore. We don't need this anymore. We don't need this anymore. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, where is the documentation? Okay, and there should be basics, and not this one. Okay, reference. Oh yes, this is the place. These are the interfaces. Let's go here. Getting started. Yep. So this is what we added, but through the starter. And okay. Okay, so let's go and look at that. Spring data source dot username. We don't have a password, so username is Postgres, and so we can get that from Docker Compose. And Docker Compose has username is by default Postgres, so we are not mentioning it, so it's Postgres. Okay, so data source dot URL is equal to, let's go to our status. So we removed the party repository implementation. So let's look at what was there in the URI. So let's see. Okay, so we had this one, so we'll just use this, and I don't think we need anything else. Okay, so let's kill this and let's save this. Let's see if it works. Okay, it's working, so let me make a call request. Okay, something went wrong. Okay, so error time, column time of party does not exist. All right, so couple of things that we need to do, I think. First, our entity party, we have not told it what party, what table to look at. So let's first add that table. All right, this is not picking it up, so let's go to pom.xml and refresh it. Maven and refresh. Okay, so now let's go to party and let's have a table annotation. Okay, so this table annotation must come from Spring or relational mapping. Alright, so let's call it party because we created the table as party. So it's called party. Alright, so it's called party. Okay, and here it is also saying column time is not present. So time is called party time. So let's rename that by party. So let's column and it's called party time. Right. Now let's see if that works. Okay, it's starting. Tools are ready. Let me see this. Oh, it still did not work. Okay, created at is of timestamp without time zone, but okay, so this seems to be a bit of a problem. Okay, so let us now first, what this type tries to say is that there is a timestamp mismatch. So the timestamp, that is the format that the database has, is of timestamp, but our driver is not sending it in a format that can be parsed by the database as a timestamp. So there are a couple of ways to fix this, but before going into that, let me add a few more annotations. So we know that this is an ID, right? So we know that this field is an ID. This will help the system, the driver, know that when it has to create an ID, it will insert, if you give an empty ID, it will create it with this, or otherwise it will be used as an identifier. So let me just let me create this. So this annotation tells you about, we can always check it. So get the sources. So it just says it's an identifier, right? So it's good to have this. So this is an ID. So let's see where this is being used. So this is being used here. Now it was being hard coded as -1n, -1 as a placeholder ID. So as a database, when we're interacting with a database, it's probably better not to put empty values. Instead, we can put nulls. So I'll do that. Null means that the drive JDBC, Spring JDBC, will create an ID for us. So let's first do that. So let's remove the ID here and keep this as null, and update this constructor. Okay, so that is that. And once we have that, let us also update it to be a serial. So this way, the database, if the ID is not passed, it will auto increment it. So drop table party, recreate it. Okay, let me run the system. It still won't work. So there is some kind of an error. Created at is a timestamp without time zone. So this format, the format in which our code is sending data to the database, does not match the database's expectation. So if you look at time zone Postgres, yeah, it supports dates of this format, but our system is probably not sending it. So there are a couple of ways to fix this. The one that we will use here is to convert the zone date time, because zone date time is not supported very well by a driver. We will use offset date time. So let's convert all of our columns from zone date time to offset date time. So zone date time gives a time zone name, like Asia, New York, Americas in New York. We are going to change it to something like +5:30 or something like that. So that should work. So let's call this offset date time, and let's call it offset date time. This one is going to have to change as well. Okay, and this is not zone, this is offset. Okay, so this is offset date time, this is offset date time. Okay, and this one is set, and this one should also accept offset. All right, and this, okay, there's a unparse and parse, so this is this should take an offset date time, and that should work. Okay, so let's look at this one. Okay, this has supported parse. Okay, local date time, the parse, and instead of zone date time, let's call it offset. Okay, let's just wrap it. The easiest would be to just wrap it with offset date time. Okay, what? Okay, it should return an offset. Okay, and offset date time, the from but it will make the thing work. Okay, so that's that. All right, let's see. There's one related problem. So this is from the service. Let's call it offset date time, and let's see what it will be used. That should probably also have to change. Okay, no, it doesn't, because it does the parsing. All right, let's see. Let's kill this. Okay, so it is now working, and the IDs are going to increase. So the only tricky thing here was the time zone formatting part, but we should now be able to see all the parties we created. So we created here, so let's call it this one sample1 Amsterdam, and let's say this is 01, and let's say Europe/Amsterdam. This should work. So this took the offset, converted it from Europe Amsterdam to +2, because it's UTC +2 during that timestamp. And if you go inside, we should also be able to see this. So what are the changes that we did? We added a few dependencies. We removed the implementation that we had. Oops. Yeah, so we added a few dependencies. We removed the implementation that we had. We added a few annotations, namely what is the table name and what is the column, when the column name is not the same as the column name in the table. Note that this created at, although it's underscore here, it will still work, because JDBC Spring JDBC will convert it for you. And we converted the zone date time to offset date time. That's it. That's all that was required for to remove all of these lines of code, which was the IMPL class. So this whole class was just replaced by the implementation that was provided to us. The last thing that we did was we did a copy from the source file, so the logging format. So we are going to change it back, and we're going to remove it to this, and we can remove it. All right, so now the original logging should also be back. Yep. And let's say a curl, and this is the 4th ID. So now we should see another sample1. Yep. So that's it.